I'll never forget the moment my entire world splintered, when, after 18 years of marriage, I discovered that the woman I trusted had secretly become a surrogate for her own sister. In those first 100 words, my heart pounded as the truth crashed over me like a tidal wave. The life we'd built together, the promises of loyalty, were shattered by deceit. Every ounce of our shared history, every whispered vow, was suddenly undermined by betrayal. That shocking revelation set in motion a chain of events that would forever alter our lives, and ignite a thirst for revenge I never knew I possessed. I had always thought our marriage was solid, 18 years of shared laughter, struggles, and dreams. We'd built a life, raised children, and weathered storms that most couples only read about. I trusted her implicitly, I believed our bond was unbreakable. So when a mutual friend inadvertently let slip a rumor that my wife had secretly carried her sister's baby, I dismissed it at first. It sounded absurd. My wife, the woman I had shared everything with, would risk everything on a hidden surrogacy without telling me? Yet as the whispers grew louder and more insistent, a gnawing suspicion took root. I began noticing small, subtle changes in her behavior, furtive glances when she thought I wasn't looking, hushed phone calls at odd hours, and an inexplicable distance that slowly crept into our conversations. I tried to brush it off as stress or personal issues unrelated to our family, but deep down, something felt off. My mind raced with doubts, but I wasn't ready to confront the possibility until one rainy evening when I found a stray document tucked away in her purse. The paper, disorganized yet damning, detailed the surrogacy agreement between her and her sister. It wasn't a rumor, but cold, undeniable evidence that my wife had made a decision that would forever change the course of our lives without even a whisper to me. I spent that night awake, staring at the ceiling, my thoughts a chaotic storm of betrayal and disbelief. How could she hide this from me? What had driven her to risk our entire marriage for something so secret, so personal? Every memory of our happy moments felt tainted by the realization that I had been living a lie. In that silent, sleepless darkness, a bitter resolve began to form within me, a resolve that promised retribution for the trust that had been so callously betrayed. In the days that followed, I sought to unravel the tangled threads of this secret. I combed through our shared documents, reread old emails, and even revisited conversations that once seemed trivial. Piece by piece, the hidden truth emerged. My wife had orchestrated an elaborate plan with her sister, one that involved a clandestine surrogacy process. She had ensured that everything was done quietly, without alerting anyone in our immediate circle, especially not me. The realization stung fiercely, igniting a cocktail of emotions, anger, humiliation, and an overwhelming sense of betrayal. I felt as if the foundation of my entire existence, our 18 years of marriage, had been built on lies. I confronted her in the quiet confines of our study one cold evening. The air was heavy with anticipation as I laid out the evidence I'd discovered. Her reaction was a mixture of tears and defiance. She insisted it was her decision, made out of a twisted sense of duty and compassion. I did it because she needed me, she whispered, voice trembling, as if apologizing for the necessity of her actions rather than the deceit. But to me, it sounded like a justification for abandoning our marital vows, for erasing the trust we had built over nearly 2 decades. The conversation spiraled into a painful exchange of accusations and shattered expectations. I felt that every word she uttered was a betrayal, a silent, calculated dismissal of everything we had shared. In that moment, I realized that I wasn't just confronting a secret surrogacy, I was facing the end of a marriage I thought was unbreakable. I left the study in a daze, my heart pounding with a mix of fury and sorrow, knowing that nothing would ever be the same again. That day marked the beginning of a long, winding journey, a journey where I would have to come to terms with the dual betrayal of lost trust and concealed truths. I started to isolate myself from the life we'd built, retreating into silence as I tried to process the magnitude of what had happened. I questioned everything, my role in our relationship, the promises we had made, and even my own self-worth. It wasn't long before the seeds of revenge began to sprout in the depths of my despair. I vowed then that I would not let her betrayal go unanswered. The pain was raw, and every night, as I lay awake, I found myself plotting small acts of retribution, not out of petty vindictiveness, but as a way to reclaim the dignity that had been stripped away. I began seeking solace in old friends who had known me before the weight of this secret burden. In hushed conversations over late-night drinks at a dimly lit bar, I recounted the shock of that revelation and the slow, agonizing disintegration of my trust. Their sympathy was genuine, and their words, though well-intentioned, only deepened my resolve to ensure that my voice would no longer be silenced by betrayal. "You deserve better than secrets and lies," one friend said, his tone heavy with understanding. "Don't let this break you. let it make you stronger. His words echoed in my mind long after the night ended, stirring a determination that I was beginning to believe could eventually lead to justice. As the initial shock began to subside, I dove headlong into understanding the full scope of what had transpired. I contacted legal advisors and financial experts, trying to gauge the implications of this hidden surrogacy on our joint assets and future. Every meeting, every consultation, felt like another reminder of the vast chasm that now lay between us. With each new piece of information, my anger grew, not just at her, but at the system that allowed such a betrayal to occur in the first place. I questioned the very meaning of commitment and the value of trust, and in the process, I started to form a plan that would eventually lead to the ultimate revenge, one that would force her to confront the consequences of her actions in a way that I never imagined possible. In the midst of this turbulent inner landscape, I also struggled with the realization that our child's well-being was now caught in the crossfire. The baby, who had been at the center of my decision to adopt, had become an unintentional casualty in this battle of loyalty and deception. I had raised him with all the love and care in the world, and now the shadow of betrayal loomed over every smile, every tiny laugh. I knew that protecting him and ensuring his future would have to be my highest priority, even as I wrestled with the desire for retribution against the woman who had shattered our world. The more I reflected on my loss, the clearer it became that the betrayal was not just about the secret surrogacy, it was about a fundamental disregard for the sacrifices I had made over 18 years. I had been there through thick and thin, investing my heart, my time, and my money into a marriage that I believed was built on mutual respect and unwavering love. And yet, in a single, devastating moment, all of that was undermined by her pursuit of a secret that belonged solely to her and her sister. The sense of injustice was overwhelming, and it spurred me to vow that I would not allow this breach of trust to go unpunished. I began to see the need for a radical change, not just in my personal life, but in how I approached every relationship moving forward. I cut off all communication with her for a while, distancing myself emotionally and physically from the life we had built together. I immersed myself in work, channeling my anguish into projects that reminded me of who I was and what I was capable of achieving on my own. Every day became a quest for identity and self-respect, a quest to rebuild my shattered world piece by piece, even as the seeds of revenge quietly took root in my heart. At night, as I lay in the darkness of my new, lonely apartment, I would revisit every moment of that fateful day in my mind, the sound of her dismissive words, the look in her eyes, the way everything around me seemed to crumble. But gradually, amid the pain, a spark of clarity emerged. I began to realize that the only way to reclaim my life was to accept the truth, however bitter it was, and to use it as a catalyst for transformation. I had to decide whether to let the betrayal define me or to rise above it, stronger and more determined than ever. With the slow passage of time, the fury inside me transformed into a burning resolve to seek justice, not the kind that would harm her physically or financially, but a justice that would force her to confront the emotional wreckage she had left behind. I knew that the road to retribution would be long and fraught with obstacles, but I also understood that every step I took was a step toward reclaiming my dignity. I started documenting my journey in detailed journal entries, outlining every act of betrayal and every sacrifice I'd made, as if by writing it all down, I could finally put the pieces together and plan my next move. And so, as the days turned to weeks, I found myself at a crossroads, a point where I had to choose between remaining a victim of a betrayal that cut deep or becoming the architect of my own destiny. With the memory of that day burning in my mind, I resolved to embark on a journey of healing and, eventually, revenge, a journey that would force me to rebuild every broken piece of my life and redefine what it meant to be truly loved and respected. In the days following that devastating revelation, my world became a swirling maelstrom of disbelief, anger, and an uneasy curiosity. I had spent long, sleepless nights rereading every line of the surrogacy documents and replaying every hushed conversation in my mind, trying desperately to reconcile the fact that my best friend had entrusted her baby to me with such secrecy. Every new morning brought with it the bitter taste of abandonment, and yet, amidst that storm, an unexpected message emerged, challenging everything I thought I knew about loyalty and identity. It happened on a quiet Tuesday afternoon. I was buried under a mound of legal files and adoption paperwork in my small apartment, trying to piece together the fragments of a life that had been upended. The soft hum of the city outside was a stark contrast to the tempest raging within me. Just as I began to believe that I had reached the nadir of my despair, the doorbell rang. I almost didn't answer, fearing another intrusion from a family member or an old friend I wasn't ready to see. But something compelled me to approach the door. There, standing in the dim light of the hallway, was a man whose presence made my heart skip a beat. His expression was a mix of regret and hesitant hope, and something about his tired eyes stirred memories I wasn't sure I wanted to revisit. "I'm Marcus," he said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of years lost. In that brief introduction, my mind reeled. Marcus, the biological father of the child I had adopted, had appeared as if summoned by fate to append the carefully constructed narrative of betrayal and abandonment. We sat in the sparse living room of my apartment, the conversation unfolding slowly, as if both of us were treading on fragile ice. Marcus explained that he had been out of the picture for reasons too complicated to recount in a single breath. "I never knew," he confessed, his voice cracking with emotion, "I never knew you'd taken him in, that you'd raised him as your own. I was swallowed by my own mistakes and lost in a life that spiraled out of control." His words were laced with a profound regret that resonated deep within me, stirring a cocktail of sympathy and indignation. Here was a man who, despite his prolonged absence, now stood before me, asking for a chance to be part of his child's life, a child I had nurtured with every fiber of my being. I felt an immediate surge of conflicting emotions. How could I possibly trust someone who had vanished from his child's life without explanation? At the same time, the very notion that he was willing to face the consequences of his past stirred something unexpected, a fragile hope that perhaps the wounds of betrayal could begin to mend if honesty was allowed to take root. Over the next several hours, our conversation oscillated between terse admissions and tentative empathy. Marcus spoke of his tumultuous past, a series of failed relationships, a deep-seated struggle with personal demons, and a pervasive sense of guilt that had haunted him since the day his daughter was born. His voice trembled as he recounted how, in a moment of despair, he'd made choices that led him further away from the person he once was, until he ultimately lost contact with the family he never really belonged to. I listened, my mind a battleground of hardened resolve and burgeoning compassion. I couldn't help but think about all the sacrifices I had made, every sleepless night, every financial strain, every whispered hope that my decision to adopt had been the right one. The revelation of Marcus's existence now complicated the entire tapestry of my life. Not only had I been disowned for embracing a decision that defied family norms, but now I was forced to confront the fact that a part of that decision was not entirely mine to control. It was a collision of worlds, the world of my best friend's desperate need, the world of my unwavering commitment to the child, and now, the unpredictable realm of a biological father determined to reclaim what he believed was his. Days turned into restless weeks as I struggled to integrate Marcus's return into my already fragile reality. I found myself oscillating between the desire to shield the child I loved from further heartache and the compelling need to give Marcus a chance to explain himself. Every interaction with him felt like an emotional tightrope walk, balancing my duty as a parent with the deep-seated wounds of abandonment that I still carried. I sought counsel from trusted friends and even returned to therapy with Dr. Hart, who had helped me navigate the labyrinth of my initial devastation. "This is about more than just forgiveness," she said during one of our sessions. "It's about redefining your boundaries and understanding that you have the right to choose what kind of family you want for your child." Her words, both challenging and liberating, encouraged me to approach the situation not as a forced reunion, but as an opportunity to rebuild on my own terms. In the midst of this inner turmoil, my daily life continued, albeit now with an added undercurrent of tension. I maintained a strict routine for the sake of my child: morning walks, afternoon playtime, bedtime stories that gently lulled him into sleep. These small rituals became my anchor, a reminder that despite the chaos of adult relationships and the bitter taste of betrayal, my child's well-being remained my highest priority. Each smile, each giggle, was a reaffirmation of why I had chosen to adopt, a quiet, resilient defiance against the notion that love could be measured solely by blood. At work, I channeled my distraction into productivity. Immersed in long hours at the office, I buried myself in projects that demanded focus and innovation. My colleagues noticed a change in me, a guarded determination, a resilience that wasn't there before. They would ask, "How are you holding up?" And I'd offer a tight-lipped smile, refusing to reveal the depths of my inner struggle. In those moments, I realized that success in my professional life was not a substitute for the emotional battles I was fighting at home, but it was a necessary reminder that I was capable of overcoming adversity, even when my personal world was in disarray. The situation reached a critical juncture one rainy afternoon. Marcus and I agreed to meet again, this time in a more neutral setting, a quiet cafe on a busy street corner that served as a haven for those seeking respite from the chaos of city life. The rain pattered softly against the window as we sat down, both of us aware that this meeting would be a turning point. Marcus, his eyes shadowed with the weight of his past, expressed a desire to be more present in his child's life. "I know I have no right to demand anything," he said, voice low and measured, but I want to try to make up for lost time. I want to be there, even if it starts with small steps. His words, laden with vulnerability, struck a chord within me. I knew that accepting his involvement would mean opening a door I had carefully closed to protect my child from further emotional turmoil. Yet, I also recognized that denying his existence completely might not serve the best interests of the child, a child who deserved the love of both his parents, however complicated that love might be. I spent several days in agonizing deliberation, weighing the pros and cons, contemplating the potential risks and rewards. I reached out to Julia, my best friend and the birth mother, seeking her perspective on this sudden turn of events. Her response was a quiet acknowledgement of the past and a hope that Marcus's return might eventually lead to healing. He was lost, and has been trying to find his way back, she said, her voice tinged with regret. But you have to do what's best for the child, always. Her words, though measured, only deepened the complexity of my emotions. Finally, I decided that if I was to consider any possibility of Marcus's involvement, it would be on strict, clearly defined terms. I drafted a list of boundaries and expectations, not as ultimatums, but as necessary guidelines to ensure that my child's well-being remained paramount. I scheduled a meeting with Marcus to discuss these terms, determined to be both fair and uncompromising. When we met, I laid out my conditions. His presence would start with supervised, limited contact, gradually increasing only if he consistently demonstrated genuine care and reliability. I made it clear that my child's safety and happiness could never be compromised. Marcus listened intently, nodding in quiet agreement, and promised to abide by every stipulation. The conversation, while tense, marked a turning point, a tentative step toward a future that could, perhaps, reconcile the fractured parts of our lives. As we parted ways that day, I felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. I knew that integrating Marcus into our lives would be fraught with challenges, that old wounds might reopen at any moment. But I also recognized that this was an opportunity, a chance to redefine what family meant on my own terms, and to ensure that my child had every possibility for love and support, even if it came in unexpected forms. In the quiet that followed, I dedicated myself to strengthening the bonds with my child, to creating a nurturing environment where he could flourish without the weight of family drama. I continued therapy sessions, pored over my journal entries, and sought solace in the steady routines of everyday life. Each day was a small victory against the betrayal of the past, a step toward healing, one measured, deliberate act at a time. I also reached out to those who had always been my pillars, old friends, supportive colleagues, and distant relatives who believed in the goodness that still existed within me. Their voices, filled with compassion and wisdom, served as a constant reminder that I was not defined by the cruelty of my family's actions. They encouraged me to hold on to the hope that every betrayal, no matter how deep, could eventually be transformed into a lesson in resilience and personal growth. As I navigated this delicate phase of redefinition, I started to see the possibility of a new, more inclusive future for my child, a future where the presence of both biological and adoptive love could coexist, each enriching his life in different ways. It wasn't about erasing the past or forcing reconciliation where it wasn't wanted. It was about creating a space where honesty and respect could gradually mend the broken pieces of our history. I realized that the journey toward such healing would be long, and the road would be strewn with setbacks and moments of painful doubt. Yet, with every new day, I grew more resolute in my belief that I was capable of shaping a future defined not by my family's rejection, but by my own unwavering commitment to love, nurture, and protect what truly mattered. By the end of those turbulent weeks, I found myself at a crossroads, one where the path forward wasn't entirely clear, but where I had finally taken the first crucial steps toward reclaiming my voice. I had set boundaries, engaged in difficult conversations, and begun to envision a future that embraced complexity without sacrificing my own well-being. Marcus's return had upended the carefully maintained equilibrium of my life, but it had also forced me to confront uncomfortable truths and, ultimately, to find a deeper strength within myself. In that state of reflective uncertainty, I decided that the next phase of my journey would be about integration, about finding a way to allow Marcus a limited role in our lives while ensuring that the love and security I had built for my child remained unshaken. I knew that this process would be incremental, that trust would have to be rebuilt slowly, brick by brick. And so, I resolved to remain vigilant, to honor my own instincts, and to never compromise on the well-being of my child, even as I cautiously opened the door to a past that I had thought was irretrievably lost. I remember that night like a scene from a slow-motion film, the moment when everything I thought I knew about betrayal, love, and family was irrevocably transformed. Under a starry sky, I sat on the back steps of my modest apartment, the cool night air heavy with anticipation and uncertainty. My mind raced as I reflected on the tumult of the past few months, the hurt of being disowned for adopting my best friend's baby, the endless nights of self-doubt and heartbreak, and now, the shocking return of Marcus, the biological father who had been absent for so long. His sudden arrival had upended the narrative I had constructed around my pain. In that bittersweet moment, I realized that everything was about to change. The betrayal that once cut so deep was now giving way to an unexpected possibility of redemption, reconciliation, and perhaps even a new beginning, a chance to redefine what family truly meant to me. In the weeks following Marcus's first visit, the days blurred into a maelstrom of emotions. I oscillated between fierce anger and fragile hope, between longing for the family I had lost and a desperate desire to create a future that was entirely my own. Every morning, as I sipped coffee by my window, I would replay our conversations, trying to decipher the sincerity behind his tentative apologies and quiet admissions. He told me, repeatedly, that he had been swallowed by his own mistakes, a decade lost in a spiral of poor decisions and overwhelming regret. His words, raw and unguarded, echoed in my ears as I wrestled with the possibility of forgiveness. Was I meant to simply cast him out as a ghost from a past I had already mourned, or could his return be the catalyst for healing the deep wounds left by our shattered family? I began to question everything about the life I had built. 4 years, I had been defined by sacrifice, the countless nights working overtime to provide for the baby I had come to love as my own, the relentless efforts to shield him from the sting of my family's rejection, and the silent endurance of watching my best friend's painful decisions unfold. All the while, I had borne the weight of being disowned as if it were a scar that would never fade. Yet now, with Marcus standing at my doorstep and my world spinning with conflicting emotions, I found myself at a crossroads. I knew that I could no longer allow the past to chain me to a single narrative of betrayal. Instead, I needed to reclaim my story, to turn this painful chapter into a foundation for a future defined by resilience, love, and the freedom to choose what family meant to me. One particularly rainy afternoon, after a long day of meetings, therapy sessions, and reflective solitude, I invited Marcus to join me for dinner at a small, unassuming restaurant near my apartment. The rain pattered softly on the windows as we sat down at a corner table, our conversation tentative at first. The dim lighting, the gentle murmur of other diners, and the comforting aroma of home-cooked food provided a backdrop that felt both intimate and real. I decided that this dinner would be a turning point, a moment to lay all our cards on the table, to discuss not only our past mistakes but the possibilities for the future. Marcus was quiet at first, his gaze drifting toward the rain as if searching for words. Finally, he spoke in a low, measured tone. "I know I have no right to ask for forgiveness, and I know I can't erase the years I missed. But every day, I've regretted not being there for him, or for you. I've spent so much time wondering if I could ever make things right. I want to try, even if it's only in small ways at first." His voice trembled with emotion, and as I listened, I felt a stirring within me, a blend of anger, sadness, and a reluctant empathy. It was as if he was offering me a chance to rewrite the story, to include him in the narrative not as a villain, but as a flawed man desperate to atone for his absence. I took a deep breath before responding. "Marcus, this isn't just about you. It's about everything that happened, the choices I made, the sacrifices I endured, and the future of a child who deserves to know all the parts of his story." I paused, gathering my thoughts. I've built my life around protecting him, around giving him a home filled with love and stability. If you're going to be a part of that life, it has to be on terms that don't compromise what I've worked so hard to create. I can't risk his well-being, or my own sanity, just to fill a gap from the past. He nodded, his eyes filled with both remorse and determination. "I understand," he said softly. "I'm willing to do whatever it takes to prove that I can be there, that I can be a positive part of his life, even if it starts with just meeting you both regularly, on your terms. I want to earn your trust, step by step." That conversation was the seed of a slow, painstaking process of rebuilding trust, a process that, over the next few months, would require every ounce of my strength and vulnerability. I set clear boundaries. Marcus could have supervised, limited contact with the child at first, and only if he consistently demonstrated genuine care and respect for the life we'd built. I made it clear that my priority was, and always would be, my child's well-being. Every subsequent meeting was like walking a tightrope. There were moments when the weight of old wounds threatened to tip me into despair, but there were also moments when his sincere efforts made me believe in the possibility of reconciliation. As autumn turned to winter, the changes in our dynamics slowly began to show. The child, bright, resilient, and ever curious, started to warm up to Marcus during controlled visits. I witnessed small, delicate moments, a hesitant smile when he saw Marcus approach, the way his eyes lit up during a shared story, the simple, cautious hand-holding that spoke of tentative beginnings. Those moments were bittersweet reminders that while the past could never be undone, the future still held promise. I continued my therapy sessions with Dr. Hart, who urged me to view these interactions not as a concession to the past, but as steps toward a more inclusive and honest reality. Healing isn't linear, she reminded me, and sometimes, letting someone back in, even a part of them, is part of that healing process. At work, I began to focus on my own projects with renewed vigor, channeling the turbulent emotions into creativity and innovation. Every late-night coding session, every brainstorming meeting, was a reminder that my worth wasn't tied to my family's acceptance, it was built on my own determination and talent. I started mentoring younger colleagues, sharing my experiences and encouraging them to find their own strength amid adversity. It was both cathartic and empowering to see that my journey, though marred by personal betrayal, had given me insights that could help others navigate their own challenges. Socially, I reconnected with friends who had always seen me as more than just someone defined by familial strife. We shared long conversations over dinner, discussed books on resilience, and even planned a small weekend getaway that reminded me of simpler, happier times. Their support, unburdened by judgment, helped me slowly let go of the anger that had once consumed me. I began to understand that forgiveness wasn't about excusing what had been done, but about reclaiming my own peace of mind. I chose to forgive, not for Marcus, not even for my parents, but for myself. I realized that the power to move forward was in my hands, and that every day was a chance to rebuild the life I wanted, one defined by my own values and dreams. One crisp winter evening, as I sat by the fire in my new apartment, I took a long, hard look at the journey that had brought me here. I remembered the nights of overwhelming loneliness, the anger that had burned like wildfire in my chest, and the shattering moment when my best friend's baby was placed in my arms, a symbol of both hope and sacrifice. I recalled every painful word, every betrayal, and realized that each one had led me to this turning point. I had grown from the depths of despair into someone who now stood tall, armed with a clear vision of my future and a determination to create a life that was authentic and unyielding. Marcus continued to be a part of our lives, albeit cautiously. Our interactions remained structured, always with my child's well-being as the central focus. Gradually, I found that his presence, rather than being a source of further pain, began to offer a chance for healing, a reminder that people are capable of change, that sometimes the hardest paths lead to the most profound growth. I started to see him not as an intruder, but as a complex individual who, like me, had been scarred by his past and was now seeking redemption. While I could never fully erase the betrayal, I learned to compartmentalize it, to let it fuel my personal transformation rather than my bitterness. The turning point in our evolving dynamic came during a small family gathering organized by a supportive relative who believed in rebuilding bridges. It wasn't a grand reunion, just a quiet, heartfelt attempt to bring together those who had been estranged by years of hurt. There, in the soft glow of candlelight and the gentle hum of conversation, I witnessed a moment of unexpected connection. Marcus, in a quiet, unassuming way, shared a story of his own, a tale of regret, of lost opportunities, and of the painful realization that the absence of his presence in his child's life was a mistake he would carry for the rest of his days. His vulnerability, displayed so candidly in that intimate setting, struck a chord with everyone present, including me. I felt a shift, an opening of a door that I had long kept sealed against the pain of the past. In that fragile, fleeting moment, I allowed myself to believe that perhaps, together, we could forge a new, albeit unconventional, family bond. That night, as I lay in bed, I pondered the possibility of integrating Marcus into our lives not as a rival for my child's affection, but as a complementary figure, someone who, despite his absence, could contribute to a fuller, richer family tapestry. I acknowledged that the road to healing and reconciliation would be long and fraught with setbacks, but I also knew that I had the strength to persevere. Every day, I continued to nurture my relationships, with my child, with friends, and even with the parts of my family that still cared. I committed myself to living authentically, to honoring my own worth regardless of the opinions of others. As spring began to bloom, the world around me mirrored the gradual renewal I felt within. The bitterness that had once consumed me softened into a determined calm. I took up a new hobby, gardening, as a way to symbolically nurture growth from the soil of past hardships. Tending to a small balcony garden became a meditative ritual, a quiet reminder that even the harshest winters yield blossoms in time. Each sprout that emerged, each flower that bloomed, was a testament to the power of resilience and the beauty of new beginnings. In the final stretch of this arduous journey, I found that my heart, though forever marked by betrayal, was also capable of immense healing. I began to see that my story was not defined solely by rejection and loss, but by the courage to rise again. The experience of being disowned for a decision I had made out of love had forced me to confront uncomfortable truths about family, loyalty, and my own identity. And while the scars remained, they became symbols of the battles I'd fought and the strength I'd discovered within myself. Now, standing at the precipice of a new chapter, I feel a profound sense of empowerment. I have learned that true family is not a given, it is earned through mutual respect, unconditional love, and the willingness to forgive and grow. Marcus's reappearance, once a source of deep anguish, has become a catalyst for reflection, a reminder that life, in all its complexity, offers second chances if we're brave enough to seize them. I look forward to the future with cautious optimism, aware that the journey ahead will be filled with both triumphs and challenges. I have redefined my narrative, reclaiming my identity as not just a survivor of betrayal, but as a creator of my own destiny. My worth is no longer measured by the shallow judgments of a broken family or the secret decisions that once left me adrift. Instead, it is defined by the love I give, the resilience I embody, and the unwavering commitment to building a life of authenticity and purpose. As I close this chapter and step into the uncertain light of tomorrow, I hold close the lessons of my past, the heartbreak that taught me to value myself, the pain that spurred me to seek out genuine connection, and the journey of forgiveness that has set me free. I am the author of my own story, and with each new day, I write a future that reflects the quiet strength of a soul reborn from adversity. No matter how many obstacles lie ahead, I know that I have the power to rise above them, to shape a destiny that honors the sacrifices of yesterday while embracing the promise of tomorrow.